Welcome to Political Jungle. I'm your guide, Steve Irwin, and at least once each month we meet a herd of animals in this jungle. Some of our guests are of the species that's risen to the top of the food chain, those who have run for political office and in many cases won the most votes. But we also meet the operatives behind the scenes, campaign managers, press secretaries, legislative aides, fundraisers, party officials, pollsters, schedulers, to name a few. And we talk not only to those who are in the hunt now, but those who have been through the game and pursued other paths. This is not your typical Sunday morning survey of the issues. If you're a wonk looking for meaty policy analysis, you may leave a little hungry. Rather, our prey is the person, the animal itself. Who is this individual? Who inspires him? What motivates her? What makes him sweat? What keeps her up at night? Where has she been? Where does she dream about going? So often we go into the voting booth and vote not on the candidate's stands, but on the candidate's character. Who we think he is down deep. Is she a good person? Would we want to be friends with him? Go out for dinner with her? Do they see what we see when they look at the world we live in? Political Jungle aspires to give you a more intimate sense of these folks. If you're curious about a life in politics, we hope you come away with a deeper understanding of the diversity of opportunities and the many trails you can pursue to get there. East End environmentalist, conservation queen, Councilperson Erika Strassburger, welcome to the Political Jungle.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad we could finally get you to run in here. You literally ran in here today. You had running shoes on. You ran this morning?
My running shoes are right over there. I was coming from a community meeting of sorts, I guess, that involved walking outside in the rain. So I have to be ready for all occasions, all seasons.
Excellent. So today, if we were going to do show and tell today, you might have brought your running shoes. You were a runner from way back, huh?
Yeah, I joined running in cross country in high school. That came out of being able to join the track team in 8th grade and had someone, a coach who mentored me and said, I think you'd be pretty good at cross country. Try this in high school. It was a wonderful team, incredibly inclusive. Anyone could join. We had over 100 people on the team. Varsity, non-varsity, and the most inspiring coaches you could imagine. So if I had to bring something in today, I wish I had, but it would be probably the first place finisher for females for a 5K I ran last year. And it was along the one of the riverfront trails. It was a great race, not the great race, a great race. And it was to benefit some of the outreach and education programs that the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra puts on, that their instrumentalists go into schools and teach kids about classical music and music in general. It's a great program, and it was to raise money for the symphony orchestra players.
So you're more a distance runner than a sprinter?
I am more of a distance runner. However, I like the 5Ks. I run 10Ks, I run half marathons, I run one marathon. But I like the 5Ks because I can really push myself, and especially the hell on hills in Beachview.
Yeah.
You can really push yourself down the hills. All it takes is just a lack of fear of tumbling down the hill, and you can basically do it. But the reason I liked that race for the symphony was it was a marriage between two of my loves, music and running. So.
Well, we'll talk about music in a little bit also, but that's great. So imagine your medal here. I always want to bring my rowing medals in. In fact, this weekend is the Head of the Ohio. And so hopefully when everybody watches it, they'll have been to the Head of the Ohio, because this may air after that. But let's talk about, you're not from Pittsburgh originally, in the hills of Pittsburgh. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the hills of California. So I grew up East Bay Area and essentially the suburbs of Oakland and Berkeley, and I guess a little further away, San Francisco.
Okay.
And it was a different experience than living in the city, but now that I live in a city and I can afford to live in a city that's walkable and has really everything I need right there in front of me. I don't know if I could go back to the suburbs, even if it was close to family and friends, and or close to a city, but not quite in the city.
Now, is your family from California from way back, or transplants there, or how did your family end up in California?
They were transplants themselves from Pennsylvania.
Oh.
So my father is from outside of Philadelphia. My mother is from the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area.
Okay.
And that's where my my family, predominantly was. A lot of people, like they did in the 60s and 70s, left their hometowns in the East Coast, went to California.
Okay.
My parents happened to stay.
Yep.
But growing up, the grass is always greener. So when I was looking at colleges, I looked at some California colleges, looked at a Midwestern college, but ultimately was really interested in what the East Coast experience was that I had heard about so often growing up. I was really curious.
Obviously, it's proved to be one that you like. You stayed here. But did you have brothers or sisters? Do you have brothers or sisters?
No brothers or sisters.
Only child?
Yes.
Nice. And what did mom and dad do for a living?
My mom, they're both retired. My mom was an OR nurse, an operating room nurse, for many, many years, taking care of patients. And my father was a chemical engineer, so working in the oil refining industry.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
And then you boomerang back. Now, have they followed you back to Pennsylvania?
So they visit as often as they can. They're firmly planted in California now, so love the California wine and the weather and everything that goes with it, and I can't blame them.
Well, my family went south to Florida, not west, from the Northeast, and they're still down there, which is good because it's a good place to visit, right? You enjoy visiting out there.
I can visit every December, and it's usually beautiful weather.
So that brought you back, and you ended up going to Bucknell, an excellent institution in the eastern part of the state, and where you studied environmental studies,
yep.
right, and international relations.
Exactly.
How'd you find Bucknell?
So Bucknell was the quintessential East Coast experience I was looking for, right? It has the brick buildings, and it's the small campus in the middle of a small town, and I really got that. What I loved about it is, even though it's a small campus, there are a lot of different types of people from a lot of different backgrounds. So I was able to meet a lot of interesting people who didn't share my political beliefs. I grew up in somewhat of a liberal, progressive bubble in the Bay Area. A lot of different political beliefs, people from rural areas of Pennsylvania, people from Long Island, all different sorts, in addition to having that one-on-one professor-student kind of relationship with smaller classes.
Yeah.
So it was a great choice for me, different from what a lot of people expected, where a lot of people expected me to go. But I was able to join, a singing group there, the dance company there, really get involved in the arts community at Bucknell.
So your parents are really sciencey kind of folks, and you went and did environmental studies, which I took a look at the curriculum at Bucknell in environmental studies. It seems very science-based, but it's a BA. I don't understand. Why is it a BA and not a BS? So
I was drawn to the political end of environmental studies, which is something I realized after I had declared a major. I wasn't interested in working in a lab. I wasn't interested in working in an environmental consulting firm. And I think before I even realized it was true, I was interested in the nexus of environmental studies, sustainable development, potentially international sustainable development, which is where I was starting to go a little bit in college, and figuring out the levers of power to make change on the environment. And so, really it was altruism that drew me to that major in the first place, and I really wanted to make change, and probably saw early on, again, unconsciously, that the way towards broader change on an issue I cared about was getting involved in politics and policy.
So you knew even then that politics and policy was a direction that you were attracted to?
I think I did. I took political science classes, and the international relations was my way of sort of reckoning having a reckoning towards making change, even if I didn't end up working at the international level ultimately.
Now, did you go straight from there to environment in New Hampshire? Was
I
that
did.
your first job after college?
I did. It was part of a fellowship program that the organization Environment America had, which is a 2-year program, not unlike, a Coro program here in Pittsburgh or Teach for America or anything like that, where you get training as part of a cohort of other people your own kind of age and ability and level, but also get to learn while you're doing. So, we come together for trainings and then learn on the ground in New Hampshire while lobbying and learning how to run an organization and fundraise and, work on press and communications. So it was a really good experience for those first 2 years, and I ultimately stayed on for an additional 2 years in New Hampshire.
And so what brought you to Pittsburgh?
Well, my partner, my now husband, Jordan, was in law school at University of New Hampshire Law School in Concord.
Ah, okay.
And was, when he finished, we met his first year, my second year, and when he finished, it was 2008, the bottom of the market, the economy had fallen out from under itself, and he was ready to come back to Pittsburgh and back to Squirrel Hill, and I said, well, I could go to California, I could try things by myself in California, or I could try out Pittsburgh for a few years and see how I like it. And 2 years in, I was hooked. There was no other place I wanted to live.
That's what it takes, right? It takes 2 years. That's what I tell everybody. Give it 2 years.
It was less than 2 years, but I gave myself 2 years to kind of make that decision, and it was a hard one, not going back to family and friends in California, but there's no better place to live than Pittsburgh.
Well, certainly the Strassburger family is very long-term Pittsburgh family, and that probably helped you feel more at home and embedded in the environment here.
Absolutely. I mean, they were the most welcoming family. I grew up in a situation where my family was spread out all across the United States, and to have my husband's, parents and aunts and uncles and cousins nearby welcoming me really helped in those first few years. I have heard that some people move to Pittsburgh, and because there's so many people here that have been here for so incredibly long, with long histories and long-term friendships, it can be a little bit difficult to break in, and that buffered against that for me.
We talked a little bit about the fact that I had I'm a transplant as well, and that if Jane Strassburger and Selma Block, the grandmothers up and would see the two transplants of us here on television on PCTV for Political Jungle, I think they'd smile.
I think they are right now.
So when you came here, you went to work for Penn Environment?
So exactly. I had the opportunity to take everything I knew with Environment New Hampshire, start to work for its sister organization, Penn Environment, which up until that point in 2009 had a strong Philadelphia base, a presence in Harrisburg, and a much smaller presence in Western Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So I was able to take everything I learned and become what was essentially the Western Pennsylvania director for Penn Environment. Didn't have that title, but that was essentially what I was doing, building the organization, growing its funding base and its influence and its the notoriety in the area as an advocacy organization, working statewide, but having a presence in Western Pennsylvania as well.
So how did you transition into City Council? Eventually became Chief of Staff. You went in as Chief of Staff, top position for Dan Gilman, a member of City Council. How'd that happen?
So after about 9 years working for essentially the same organization in different locations and really enjoying it, I was ready for a change. That for someone who's maybe in between the millennial and Gen X generations, that's a long time to work for an organization or a place right out of college. So I was just ready for some sort of change, and what I came to realize was that I wanted to do something focusing on Pittsburgh. So I was looking at government, I was looking at philanthropy, I was looking at nonprofits, and when Dan Gilman won his primary and the mayor won his primary, I saw an opportunity that I hadn't seen before at the local level, always being interested in working at the local level of Pittsburgh politics, but not seeing that opening, and that's when I saw the opening. And fortunately, he was hiring and open to an open hiring process, and I interviewed, and the rest is history. I was incredibly grateful for that initial position to get my foot in the door.
So you know that by district in the city council, the first by district person for your District 8 was Dan Cohen. Dan Cohen begat Bill Peduto, his chief of staff, who begat and who became councilperson, who begat Dan Gilman, who became councilperson, who begat you, who became councilperson. Did you know that when you started, that maybe, did you have in your mind the thought that one day you were going to run for office?
I did not have that in my mind, no. And I didn't know the legacy of the position until I was well into the position. I found out when I would meet people at cocktail parties and they would say, you know, there's this legacy here. Are you going to run for office? And I always said I didn't know. But I think in hindsight, I did know that I wanted to run at some point or for some office. I just wasn't sure that it was going to be city council. I remember living in New Hampshire. And that's a state where it's fairly easy for newcomers to, maybe not newcomers to the state, but newcomers to politics and government to get a foothold because there are 400 state representatives, 24 senators. If you're living in a city like Concord or Manchester, you can run, and if you're a Democrat, basically, if everyone's checking the Democratic slate box, you win, and then you're in, and you get some experience. And I think, I remember thinking back then, if I stay here, there's no doubt I'll run for state rep. It's just something that you can do pretty easily. And in Pittsburgh, especially as a female, I think it's a little bit more difficult to find an avenue to run. I really just was fortunate. I fell into the opportunity to have an easier path than many in my position.
You're making me laugh. That's hilarious. I mean, you fell into a path in one of the most politically active areas of the city, and you had an incredibly difficult primary in a very short period of time against some really top quality candidates, and you ended up getting 2/3 of the vote. How'd you do it?
Well, again, I feel as if I'll be completely honest, I had some institutional support that really helped me. It really helped me. For those who didn't know my name already, they knew the names of the people that supported me, and that made a big difference. That's not to say I didn't work hard. I worked extremely hard and was taking nothing for granted. I worked every day to find new volunteers, to knock on doors. At times I was attending 2 or 3 different house party fundraising or friend-raising events an evening, while also working as chief of staff to keep the office afloat with my colleagues. So it was a lot of hard work in a short amount of time, but I won't discount or discredit the amount of support that I received that really assisted my win.
So the night that you won, I remember you saying, I'll quote you, "I expect that the next 4 years will be challenging, interesting, exhilarating, and at times exhausting." Probably exhausting, but that's what it takes. So let me ask you, you've been in office now for how long? How many months?
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. Tell us one thing that's been challenging.
Well, I have a tendency, like a lot of humans, to want to make everyone happy all the time. And in this position, I learned it as a chief of staff, but I really see it firsthand as councilperson. You really can't please everybody, especially when there's a neighborhood issue. And there's always going to be a segment of the population that disagrees with the position of another segment of the population. You can do your best to try to bridge the gaps, try to find a compromise. And that's kind of the best scenario when everyone is satisfied, if not getting 100% of what they want. Sometimes it's just impossible, and that's challenging for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning. I'm still learning the methods and the processes that you use to try to bridge those gaps and to build consensus in a community.
How about interesting? What's been something that you found extremely interesting from this new perspective?
There are an incredible number of tools in a public official's tool belt to get things done, and I'm still learning a lot of them. When it comes to economic development or sustainable development in the city, there's not just what the city has to offer, incentives, to do the right thing, in my book, doing the right thing would be increasing affordable housing or including sustainable practices like green infrastructure for stormwater or energy efficiency and conservation or renewable energy and development. But also, maybe other incentives to do the right thing. There's also what the Urban Redevelopment Authority has. So just constantly being able to learn about what the tools in our tool belt are. And I'm learning from my colleagues, I'm learning from staff or directors that have been there for a long time, and just the fact that I can continue to learn every single day on the job.
So what's exhilarating? What have you found exhilarating?
This doesn't happen very often, but once in a while you get an invitation to meet someone really, really special.
That's what I would think, yeah. So
I
who have you met?
So I met Joe Biden.
Very cool.
That was not really through the job. It was attending, as sort of on the political end of things, a Labor Day parade and a Labor Day event, which I do every year. But that was exhilarating. Having dinner with Doris Kearns Goodwin, incredibly, who had given a speech about her new book at Chatham University. That was a really, really special experience and something I'll never forget.
Well, considering the great pay that you get as a city council person, those little perks make it a little bit worthwhile, right?
Once in a while,
Every
you take
so
advantage
often.
of those perks, yeah.
And how about exhausting? What have you found to be exhausting?
I don't feel exhausted by the job. I welcome anyone to contact me at any time and to take care of constituent concerns. But, of course, you have to. What I've learned is you have to put a limit on yourself.
Yes.
Because if it were up to me, I would probably be on my email, on my phone, answering concerns and questions and getting back to people and responding as quickly as possible. What I've learned is you just can't. If you're going to sustain yourself in this position for the long haul, you have to.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's
right?
a marathon, not a sprint. That's my forte anyway. So
That's right.
Put the phone down, spend time with family, spend time with friends, and pursue activities outside of work once in a while too. So, it can be exhausting if you let itself be, let it be, but I've tried to strike somewhat of a balance in my first 6 months.
Nice. All right, that was kind of like a deep dive, but we have the part of the show that we call Deep Dive. We're going to go take a deep dive, talk about what inspires you, what gets you up in the morning, what keeps you up at night, and what you want to be when you grow up. So first, how about inspiration? You were in California, so you had a lot of great politicians out there to watch. You have, you're an environmentalist, Rachel Carson, Bill McKibben, Al Gore, others. How about one you don't even know about who may have inspired you? Maybe in some ways your predecessor on council, the last environmentalist, Michelle Madoff. Have you heard about Michelle Madoff?
I have heard about Michelle Madoff. She probably is more talented at political theater and street theater than I ever will be, and I give her credit for some of the tactics she used to bring attention to really critical issues, frankly. But what I think is interesting is that, not to take us too off topic, but I think is interesting is that people, I think, especially women who are thinking about running for office, think, I have to fit into a certain type of personality, I have to be a certain type of person to make it as a female in politics. And I think, a lot of people saw folks like her or Sophie Maslow who were really outspoken, really, just had a certain personality succeeding. And, I guess I'm here to say, you can be the slight introvert. You can be the person who is more comfortable in a one-on-one discussion than speaking to crowds of people and still be a successful elected, or at least, be elected in the first place.
Yeah.
So, but certainly the women who preceded me on council, Sophie Maslow is the first female mayor in the city of Pittsburgh. It's someone I named throughout the campaign and debates, who inspires you, who do you emulate?
Yes.
What I like about Sophie is that she was someone who wasn't afraid to, do the kind of nitty-gritty work. She would meet you on site, and talk to you in your living room or at your kitchen table, and really get into the weeds of an issue and really help you with that. Something I strive to do every day.
Great. Motivation, what gets you up in the morning? We know you love to run. What else?
It's the altruism. I mean, it's just helping people. And one thing I found frustrating working for an environmental organization is you're working on policy changes, you're working on incremental change that could take 8 to 10 to 16 years to really pass and to see any change. You're just chipping away every single day. When people would call me, I worked a lot on the natural gas, in the natural gas industry, and on fracking and kind of the environmental concerns around fracking, and people who were experiencing it for the first time in their neighborhoods would call me and ask for help, and I could only give them so much help. I could only provide so many services to them before I had to recommend that they call an attorney or a social services agency. And in this job, I really can help them if it is something that the city can control. So it's the people that I serve. It's the amazing individuals, the residents that are doing incredible things, the small business owners in the district. There's just so many inspiring people in the district and throughout the city that I'm just incredibly honored to serve.
And what keeps you up at night? I mean, is it, especially with your focus on environmental issues, drinking water, air, what other things? What are the things that keep you up at night?
Drinking water, air quality, climate change. We're only a city, but I think we're doing what we can to strive for exactly what I think the country should be doing, which is reducing all climate emissions, carbon dioxide, methane, everything, as much as we possibly can from the transportation sector, the building sector, everything that we can, the industrial sector.
Now, does you chair innovation management and performance? Is that the committee you chair?
Yeah.
And why don't you explain to our viewers what that means?
So that's everything that has to do with any kind of technology that the city is, any kind of technological endeavors. So that's everything from our website and 311 to any of the new programs that are now accessible that I'd like more people to know about. Things like Building Eye. So you can go to Building Eye, it's spelled Building EYE, and they can look up if there's a development happening down the street. Do they have all their permits? Have there been any violations? Who is the contractor? What's their phone number? So you can really understand there's more transparency. So those types of apps and applications that the city's working on, any kind of new contract will come through my committee.
Great. Aspiration, what do you want to be when you grow up?
I'm still figuring it out. I've never had a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan. Love what I do right now, and I say that every time I'm in a position. I always love what I do, and I think when I was first interviewing for my position as chief of staff, what I said then remains. I want to do something for Pittsburgh. I want to help Pittsburgh succeed.
Well, Pittsburgh's lucky to have you here to help do that. So we enter into the final. It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It does go fast. I can't believe it's already over.
Well, you can come back to the jungle anytime.
Excellent.
You pass
Thank
the test. Rapid response, which you know as a political community organizer is what you do. If someone comes out against you, you got to be able to respond quickly. So the category, your category, is Big Yellow Taxi, which considering do you know what Big Yellow Taxi refers to?
I do. I am a Joni Mitchell fan, so.
Let's talk about that just for a second, okay?
Okay.
About your music thing. So
Sure.
do you still sing?
I do sing.
Do you play any instruments?
I play guitar. Not very often anymore, but.
If you brought the guitar, I would have brought the accordion. It would have been incredible.
And that's why I didn't bring it. Not that I don't want to hear you play the accordion.
Oh, I thought that was it.
It's been a little while. It's been a while since I played the guitar, so.
All right.
But I sing opera, and I also sing in a blues band.
How often?
Well, we meet every week, so we had practice last night, but we probably perform about 4 times a year, sometimes at the Squirrel Hill Night Market, sometimes at Moondogs and Blawnox.
What's the name of the band?
The Relics.
The Relics.
Yes.
Beautiful. What instruments?
So we have a couple of vocalists. One of the vocalists is also our drummer, and 2 guitarists, a bass player, an organ player, and a harmonica player.
Oh, great. So you don't need an accordion. You got the keyboards and the harmonics there.
We
so
can
you're in
always
good
use
shape.
anyone. I mean, horns, accordions, whatever you can bring. We're welcoming.
Well, wonderful. That's fantastic.
It's really fun.
So considering this tension in your life between paradise and parking lots,
Okay.
we thought Big Yellow Taxi made a lot of sense. So here we go. Appliance efficiency. Maytag dryers or clothesline in the sun?
And this is my personal, what I actually use myself or what I prefer.
It's whatever your interpretation is, Erika.
Ah, okay. Well, clothesline in the sun.
Do you actually do that?
In the summer, occasionally, with certain clothes, sheets.
beautiful.
Not everything.
Okay.
Can't always hang your suits up in the sun, but you know.
Smell PGH or go mobile PGH?
Smell PGH.
So you're on the Parking Authority, which has sort of jurisdiction over go mobile PGH. We share that also. I used to be the chair of the Parking Authority years ago.
I didn't realize
there's
that.
my picture's not up there. There's which is a great place to be. I think you learn more about the city at the Parking Authority than a lot of places.
It's a great place to be.
So how's that working? How's that go mobile PGH
It's great.
app? It's okay?
It's wonderful, and I use it all the time, and I think it's a huge service to the city. The only reason I chose Smell PGH is because I use it quite often. I wish I didn't have to, and I'd like to get more people to use it.
So I use it, but it goes off 20 times a day, reminding me that I shouldn't be breathing the air outside. I mean, what can we do about this? I mean, seriously, as a member of city council, a city council that from time to time would pass resolutions regarding international problems far from home, where you could really have no impact necessarily, very little impact, if any. But in the environment, you know this area better than anybody, I think, who's in office in this region. What can we do?
So we can't legislate because that is a county health department, the county health department role, and the county's role in their jurisdiction. But we can use the other powers of convening, power of kind of leading through the bully pulpit, and when I say convening, I mean convening environmental organizations, others that are working on air quality, empower them to do their job, convening citizens to raise their voices and ensure that whether it's stationary sources or transportation sector that's creating the air quality problems, that they are making their voices heard to the county health department. And that is working. I mean, our county health department director, Dr. Karen Hacker, has implemented some pretty stiff fines for some of our biggest stationary sources, you know, the Clairton Coke Works, sources of pollution. And if they don't comply, you know, they're going to see additional fines. So we're in the midst, I think, of seeing some potential change in our air quality. It takes time to go through the processes, but I don't think it would have happened without the outcry from folks around the city and region.
Yes. Okay, good. You ready? Scooby or Healthy Ride?
Healthy Ride.
Okay. What do you think about Scooby?
I think Scooby's great. Anything that can give us an alternative to driving is wonderful.
Okay.
You can take the bus, that's great. If Scooby's better for the jaunt across the city, wonderful. I like riding a bike, so I just prefer Healthy Ride, and I think that's it's fun to see people riding, you know, in their kind of dress clothes downtown or wherever they're going.
Is that going to happen during the winter too? I've taken Scooby; it's a lot of fun. But do you think does it happen in the winter too?
I think it can handle snowy roads. It can handle weather.
It's going to be interesting.
Whether people use it or not, it'll be interesting to see that. But from what I understand, this is their test case. So if they can make it here, they can make it anywhere.
The first time I ever tried to drive a stick shift was in San Francisco. It's a good place to learn.
Wow, you're brave.
So I can make it anywhere now. Tesla or Prius?
Prius.
Uber, Lyft, Zipcar, or Pat?
Uber is what I usually use, but I like. I think all of them are great. And Pat, I mean, Pat is actually what I use more than anything else. But I think Uber and Lyft and Zipcar are wonderful alternatives for, you know, let's say you're out, you've had a couple drinks, and you need to get home right now, and you don't want to drive. That's a responsible thing to do. Yeah. But Pat is, you know, I'm fortunate to live in Squirrel Hill. I have great bus service. That's what I more often use than anything else.
Silent Spring or the end of nature? I'm not sure if that's a choice. I'm just sort of bringing up. So The End of Nature is Bill McKibben's book on 350.org. Talk a little bit about carbon, the carbon thresholds and what that means. Well, essentially,
if we go above 350 parts per billion of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, we're going to be past the point of no return. We will, we'll be on track to go way above the 2 degrees threshold that our planet can take, and it will take maybe some sort of massive scientific undertaking or technological undertaking to reverse that, but the easiest thing that we can do now is stop using so much electricity, create more energy efficient buildings and appliances, but also start to make the conversion to cleaner sources of energy. And we need to do that in a way that preserves people's jobs, but really growing the green energy sector in places like Western Pennsylvania, where we have the infrastructure and ability to do that. But
sustainability.
It's sustainability. It's what we have to do if we're going to survive as a planet, as a species, and have the same kinds of experiences for our grandchildren and their grandchildren that we've had today, with beautiful national parks to visit and being able to experience snow in Pennsylvania.
So you're on the Carnegie Library Board. You like to read books?
I do like to read.
So recommend a book to everybody.
Well, I'm reading Founding Mothers right now. It's an older Cokie Roberts book,
Oh, okay.
And it tells the story of the women of the American Revolution, which I think people don't understand enough or give enough credit to. It's all the women who stayed at the homestead, raised their children, found ways to make money for their families and and were oftentimes entrepreneurs and business owners. When the men were off fighting and politicking in Philadelphia or France or whatnot. So it's a great read. I'm really enjoying it. Another one, slightly more radical, slightly more violent, but I would recommend just as sort of a zeitgeist book for the time. It's called The Power.
Okay.
And I won't say anything more about that, but go check out The Power.
Excellent. Okay, I got it. It's on my list. Two more. Speaking of libraries, Carnegie's libraries, Squirrel Hill or Braddock?
Braddock.
It's a great library.
It's such a special place.
Yeah.
The library, the town, the vibe that you get there is, I love spending time in Braddock.
And last but not least, Erika Strassburger, star of political stage, or Erika Strassburger, star of screen?
Political stage.
Do you know about the Erika Strassburger, star of screen? The
I'm
actress?
sorry. I'm sorry. I take it back.
Okay.
I saw her in Hamlet last year. She was fantastic.
Ah, okay. So you've seen big time actress with the same name.
I hope she's watching. I'd like to meet her one day and take my photo with her.
I think we can make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah. There was that's because she comes up right after Erika Strassburger : husband on Google as the most number of searches, just in case you're wondering.
That's great to know.
Yeah, you're number one, and then.
Wonderful. I mean, she clearly is a good person. She dresses up apparently as Disney princesses and visits the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh.
Oh, isn't that great?
I found that out because people thought that was me, and they said, "That's so wonderful, you do this." And I said, I had to break it to them, it's not me, it's someone else with the same name, but
Right.
she sounds like a wonderful person.
Well,
and
being Steve Irwin, I get it. At least yours is alive.
you do get it, yes.
So, Erika, thank you for coming in. Thanks for moving to Pittsburgh, for making transplants look good, for all that we need you to do to protect our air and water, and making City Council a vibrant and important change agent for our lives here in Western Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. How did I get to be your host? Well, if you think the crocodile hunter himself has come back to lead you through a different kind of jungle, you're misguided. This Steve Irwin is the offspring of two kids who met at a Young Dems dance in the 50s. At age 7, I was canvassing door to door for candidates. I've worked for Ds who became Rs and Rs who morphed into Ds. I've raised money, served as legal counsel, spoken as a surrogate for folks running for everything from district justice to president of the United States. I've worked for mayors, governors, senators, attorneys general, and one extraordinary federal judge. With 50 years of political experience, I've become intimate with countless individuals in this business of all stripes, and I'm excited to scope them out with you. So come on and safari with me next time on Political Jungle.